gather are the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of these lands. And with that, we'll move into our management report. Could I get a motion for receipt? Could someone second that? Thank you. Is there any questions or discussion on the report? Seeing none, we'll vote on receipt. Is anyone opposed to receipt? And that's carried. All right, and on to reports. Our first report is the Regional Recreation Pass Initiative.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. And Susan Bullock is here, Manager of Recreation Programs, to present the report and answer any of your questions.
Oh, just one. Could you hit the button on the podium for me, the speaker?
So working.
Thanks. Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be here today and to update you all on the status of the Regional Recreation Pass Initiative. Recreation staff have been working in partnership with the other Comox Valley Municipal Recreation Departments, including the City of Courtenay, Town of Comox, and the Village of Cumberland on this initiative for some time. It has been a slow process. However, with the recent success of the LEAP, the Leisure for Everyone Accessibility Program, all of the partnering recreation departments are now ready to move forward and begin investigating the feasibility of a regional recreation pass. This initiative would provide recreation facility access at multiple municipalities for those that choose to purchase the regional pass. It would also provide more recreation choices and access for residents. There is currently a survey about to be launched that will gather information on the potential demand for this type of pass, what additional services residents would be interested in accessing, and if and how much extra they would be willing to pay for it. For the timeline, the survey will be completed on April 11th. The team working on this project will meet the following day on April 12th to review the results. And if there is sufficient interest in the regional pass, staff will proceed to the next steps, which will include the development of the pass options and fee structure, the promotion plan, and the proposed finance plan on how the funds will be allocated to the various municipalities. The CVRD Recreation Department anticipates bringing an updated report to the Commission in late fall or early winter 2023. If there is sufficient interest from the local residents in the development of a regional pass, and if the plan is supported by the various commission boards and councils, it's anticipated the plan could be ready. The plan would be ready by the end of the year. Are there any questions?
Thanks for that report. I imagine there'll be quite a lot of community interest in this upcoming survey. So it's great news that we'll be getting that out. And go ahead, Director Kettler.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think I got lost in the acronym somewhere because I actually thought that when we implemented the LEAP program that was sort of like the universal pass. So sorry for any misunderstanding that might have caused in the public, but I'm glad to see that we're investigating that now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Really happy to see this come forward. I guess my questions are mostly just around the timeline and the process on page 2 of the staff report. There's an indication of free and low cost tools to get the uptake of the survey. I'm wondering what's not explicitly mentioned here is targeting the survey for folks who are also already accessing recreational services across municipalities. I'm thinking about people who access our recreational gyms and fitness facilities. So I'm wondering if you can speak to any kind of specific process to get the opinions of folks who are already engaged. And I guess my second question, just while I have the microphone, is just how has staff considered reaching out to equity groups to ensure that voices from across the community are included in this?
Okay, through the chair. So with each of our municipalities, we have a registration system that tracks everybody who has an active membership, who's registered in any program like the last 4 years. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to send out the invite to the survey to all of those. So through every municipality, all existing users, unless it's just a drop-in, would have them. And then at our drop-in counters, we're going to have surveys that people can fill in by hand, and there'll be posters throughout the facility. We'll also be reaching out to Success by Six, understanding the early years. They have a committee in which they have a network that kind of contacts everybody that works with children throughout the entire Comox Valley Regional District area. And the survey would be sent to that group, which would then dissipate to all of their groups. Family Children's Services would have the survey sent out to them. So if they work with other groups as well, we're anticipating it being spread in addition to other organizations that we have contacts with.
If I just follow up, our school district colleagues not here, but given that recreational services are also, we have a large component of that being for children and youth. I'm wondering if there's maybe some room for us to explore ways to communicate the survey out to parents and children and youth in the community as well, just to have that representation. I don't want to speak on behalf of our colleague who's not here today, but just in recognition of the amount of programming and services we offer to that population.
Yeah. Through the chair, that's an excellent idea. We do posters that get emailed to all the parents 4 times a year. So we can be sure that we'll do a poster that gets emailed out this month that includes that information.
Thanks for those answers. Are there any other questions around this upcoming process? All right, seeing none, we'll vote on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? That's carried. Thanks for the presentation. And moving on to our next item, we have the 2023 to 2027 financial plan for Recreation Grant Service Function 600. And over to staff.
Thank you very much. And Doug DeMarzo will present the proposed staff report and recommendations and answer any of your questions.
Thank you and good afternoon through the chair. I'm here to present Recreation Grant Function 600. This is one of the great grant opportunities we have that really looks at developing and building partnerships in our community by supporting nonprofits, as well as some of those special facilities in the past that have needed and been viewed as a regional perspective have also been helped with this grant. So as a reminder, the contributions are really to cover the costs of recreation programs and the facilities. And in particular, this grant was largely set up at its onset to look at the Courtney outdoor pool and how to support that. The proposed budget you'll see has a tax levy of 1128 envisioned, and that will change a little bit at the recommended budget, but not a lot. So in 2022, we had some work plan accomplishments and some interesting things happening in the community as part of this grant. One was the name change to be newly represented in the Minor Hockey League as the Comox Valley Flyers in context with Comox First Nations and others. So that happened last year. And then we hosted a large mini World Cup, which was supported by this grant from communities all over South Island. And it was a great event, although one of the wettest ones I've personally been to for the World Cups, but still had a lot of fun. Really is a grant. Yeah. So moving forward, these aren't all our work plan priorities, obviously, but this is the programs that are supported throughout the grant, looking at upwards of 664,000. And of interest of this grant is typically in years past, we've really looked at supporting the Courtney Outdoor Memorial Pool in both a capital piece for about 100,000 and also in an operating piece for about 100,000. This year, Courtney has requested an additional $75,000 for the outdoor pool, and that's largely to determine some leaks that they have. And my esteemed colleagues, Susie and Chris Davidson from the city of Courtney are online as well to answer any questions if you should have any about the state of that pool and what's the expectations are of that $75,000 additional ask. It's largely looking at engineering studies and potentially identifying the leak and how to fix it. And then likely they'll be back once that study is completed to update to this rec commission and seek additional support dollars. Another interesting piece that you may find here that's different from some in the past is the cricket field upgrades have been added That's subject to a suitable field site being found. And we were able to do that by reducing the 30,000 special events piece that usually sits in this grant that's usually unallocated. So that did reduce that for future asks throughout the year. So there's not a large buffer of allocation in this grant this year because we've already buffered some of that money to the cricket field upgrades if a suitable site is found. Additionally, the Comox Valley United Soccer Fieldhouse continues to be a carryover. And a lot of that's pending the field decision, I think, by the Rec Commission as well for a 3-year strategic planning process. The remainder are ones that you typically see in the year to year in most of our support for the programs. So what that looks like in the proposed budget is 597,000 with a large surplus from the year before, which is, as I alluded to earlier, mostly the soccer clubhouse and a few other payments. And then you're looking at this new budget that was more accurately on the last page. There's no real capital cost with this, but there is a reserve that has been set up to the tune of 32,000 now contribution to that reserve. So it's basically a little bit of personnel costs and then other pieces. With that, I think those are the key messages I wanted to relay with the recreation grant today. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Doug. And yeah, just so commission members are aware, we also have a staff member from City of Courtenay available if anyone has questions about the specifics of the additional ask related to the outdoor pool. And got some questions in the queue here. I believe it's Director Hillian first. Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering if there's been any thought given over the years to separating out the municipal funding that's contained in this budget from the other grants, because it seems like it's a different arrangement with municipalities that are actually partners in the whole funding process, as opposed to community agencies that are being supported.
I think the key premise, I guess, to answer that, firstly, yes, there has been thought on a few times over the years, but we usually land on the conclusion that this really focuses and is an opportunity for those regional type projects, such as the Memorial Pool. The skate park was another one. And it's a nice place and a good place to fit to provide that capital regional input, like for a one-time kind of project, like the pickleball courts. When the CBRD was asked, I think we funded them through the 10,000. I can't remember the amount now, but this was funded through rec grant contributions as well. So it fits nicely to support municipalities when they're going kind of above and beyond in a regional type facility, and then continues or has continued to support nonprofits as well. I think the nonprofits were actually kind of later to the interpretation of this grant, but have been a welcome addition. And really it's up to this commission how they foresee it in the future. And we're open to suggestions, but that's a little bit on the history of how we got there. And I think there's also other capital projects that munis might see that are more regional or a one-time offering. And those might in the future be a good spot to ask for regional support as well.
Thanks. And Chair, if I can just be indulged, I'd like to just welcome back Susie Saunders as Courtney's Director of Recreation and Cultural and Community Services. Good to have her back with us.
Thanks, Director. And on to Director Keller.
Thank you, Chair. So in the report around the Memorial Pool, it talks about the additional request of the $75,000 above the $100,000 for this year, but then also anticipating that there's going to be another request for $600,000 in 2024. And since we have the recreation person from Courtenay here today, I know we don't have the long-term goals for the pool nailed down yet, but it sounds like you probably know what you want to do in the next couple of years. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit, it would be great to know that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's Chris or Susie that would want to answer this, but I see Chris is unmuted.
Yeah, and it's Craig Rushton here with Chris Davidson.
Hi.
And thanks for the question, Councillor Kettler. So one way or another, the pool does need to stay operational. You know, in the interim, as we look towards the future, and we know from the study that we do need to keep a certain level of service in the community. So there, right now that we're asking for money to fund the design, so we can further understand exactly what the level of commitment might be thereafter in terms of fixing the problem. And then the plan is to, once we understand that a little bit further, return back to the Rec Commission and report on that.
Okay, just to follow up, so the 600,000 is basically what you're anticipating it would cost to fix all issues and have status quo.
You want to take this one, Chris?
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the chair, that's our best estimate at this point in time. Once we continue on through the works this year and do our investigation and analysis, we should have a much better idea as to understanding the budget needed for future capital works. But based on what we know now, that's our best estimate, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I think Director Kettler was looking for clarification that it is just related to repairs and not upgrades, so to speak. Like it wouldn't change really what the services are there. That 600,000, it's meant to address existing issues. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Thanks. And I've got Director Grieve next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the line item special event game contribution, tweak my memory around the BC Summer Games. Is somebody remind me, is that this year or next year we're looking to host that? And would that be something that would fall under that line item?
If you're referring to the BC Seniors Games.
Seniors Games, yeah.
Our esteemed municipality of Nanaimo was successful with that grant, and
Okay, so
we're
we
hosting communities, and we were not.
okay, so we're not in the running on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. And Director Jalika.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One around on the table, the Vancouver Island Mountain Sports Center, and in the staff report, it specifically mentions that staff are currently awaiting a response from this group to confirm their programming. Just as a cursory look onto their website, can staff speak to what the funding in previous years has gone to? I'm not quite clear how it fits into recreational programming from what I'm able to see. And I'm also noting here that we haven't actually received word on what they're planning to do, but we're being asked to vote in favor of something we're not sure is going to happen. And so I'm wondering if staff can speak to specifically that group.
Yeah, absolutely. In the past, they've hosted the facility up on top of the mountain center, and hosted programs out there available to schools and other groups. And additionally, they've also promoted and hosted a number of young athletes through different types of programming and financial support for competitive processes as well. So in the past, that building's been used for that, and they've typically been able to utilize this grant to help support both the payments for that building as well as supporting youth in the community. With COVID, things kind of changed, and the programming currently is not really happening as far as we can tell up at the center. It's usually being used for housing. So we're just looking for clarification with them that they're still offering ongoing programming and athlete support in the community, which I'm pretty sure they are, but we just need to have that confirmed. And if that's not the case, then this would just be a surplus item, and we'd either report back or not report back. It just wouldn't be paid out in August if they stop that side of their nonprofit business model, for lack of a better word.
Right. So as a follow-up to that specific item, if staff receives word that they are in fact not running programming, it will be a staff decision to withhold the approved funding.
We would have a conversation with them, and if they were acceptable with that decision, we'd probably leave it at the staff level. And if they had other comments, then we might have to bring it back to the rec commission for further consideration.
Great. And I guess just one more follow-up. Is there an opportunity for us maybe to remove it from this report, and at a time when you do get confirmation that it comes back as a quick item for us to review?
It's part of the tax requisition requirements, and we don't have a lot of reserves, so it'd be hard to get the monies back from a reserve. We just fall behind in reserves. It's be better to move it forward as a surplus, but I'm open to any option at this time.
Okay. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything on that. I do have another.
There's no other lights on,
Okay.
so if you're not finished, you can keep
yeah.
going.
My other question is when reading the staff report, it doesn't appear that we're getting reports from the organizations that receive funding from us. Is that correct?
I will defer that question to finance.
And just to be clear, what I mean by that is a qualitative report, maybe some photos, something that actually indicates exactly what the organizations are doing with the funding.
Through the chair to the directors. So yes, as part of the annual budget submission, so they have to submit a 5-year kind of financial plan to us. In addition to that, yes, normally they are required to include things like financial reports. If they are a nonprofit and they're holding AGMs, we do look to receive their AGM reports and those of that nature, so that kind of helps us articulate what types of programming they're providing and are they meeting the auspices of, in this case, the rec grant service.
Yeah, just a follow-up to that,
Go
Chair,
ahead.
if I can. I know for myself, I think that would be really useful to review at the commission level, just to see the good work that these nonprofits are doing. And I think also from the taxpayers' perspective, for those watching this and curious maybe how the rec commission is allocating funding to nonprofits in the community, it might be a good communication strategy to also be able to support these nonprofits in their initiatives in the community, while also being transparent around the ways in which we are spending recreation funding. And so just kind of from both a decision-making perspective, I think it would be useful to get those reports, but also from a communication to the public perspective, I think it could also be a positive thing for us to demonstrate, I'm thinking social media posts, maybe a little descriptor saying, hey, this $25,000 went to running this type of programming. Here's some photos. So just an idea, I guess, and curiosity if that's something that would be open to happening.
Yeah, it's something they do provide us with a fair bit of information. It's something we can suggest in the next round if they want to provide us with a little more. I will admit many of them would and have requested to come to this commission as a delegation, and we will maybe see a couple of them if they do a major process. But I guess we've suggested that they don't all come as a delegation, for lack of a better word, but we can keep that in mind when having those discussions with them.
And if I can add to what Doug's noted, certainly once we kind of took a look at all of our granting programs a couple of years ago and really created the new kind of centralized portal, we also are ensuring to post to our website the kinds of organizations that we are funding annually. So we are kind of reporting out to the community that through the various granting services, whether it's this one, arts and culture, or our rural community grants, the organizations we're funding to the level we're funding them. So people do get a sense of the organizations we are supporting throughout the community.
Thanks for that. Are you all finished? You can keep the mic because there's no other lights on, so you can keep going. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of Director Hillian's previous question about the pool and reading the staff report, there's quite a lot of analysis specifically about the Courtney Memorial Pool relative to the other proponents for this service, the granting service. I heard our staff, Doug, you shared, that you'd be open to a different way of approaching. The way I'm seeing this, being a regional asset, we had the pool as part of the aquatic strategy. The city having to come to the commission for additional funding I am really curious, and I actually have, a potential amendment to add to this second resolution in the staff report specifically to the pool around exploring formalizing an agreement with the city around the pool so that it's not considered as part of this granting process. I find it quite confusing that it's next to our small nonprofits who are really explicitly doing one type of programming rather than asset management and something that's really a regional service, being an aquatic service. So I'm wondering, I've got something written down here, and I've heard you say that there's an openness to exploring, but really I'm wondering if you can speak to whether or not you have any awareness around some sort of formal facility support agreement that regional districts have with facilities like a pool.
Well, typically, we do have support agreements in our turf and field piece with the school district and city of Comox in that sense. So they are available. I think the service establishment really looked at this service supporting the outdoor memorial pool when it came from the CRA. So that's the impetus for it. And since then it's grown into these other nonprofits as various commissions and at the time boards have seen fit. So with that, we would probably suspect the process would be for the city of Courtenay to approach us if they wanted a different avenue to support the pool. So, or I guess the opposite is we can go make that option available to them that we want to further discuss as you've suggested. But typically the arrangement has suited the city, to my knowledge. I don't want to speak on their behalf completely, but now we're in a little bit different time where it's a little bit higher potential forecasted capital pressures. So that's perhaps time for that conversation.
Yeah, and I noted just as a follow-up in the staff report, you specifically mentioned working with city staff, the city of Courtenay staff, and to start to have those conversations. So I think for me, having a formal agreement would lay out the expectations, the roles, the responsibilities, and set out a financial plan of expectations and a mechanism for the commission to consider, rather than, it just feels a little odd for me. I'm not sure other directors at the table, but feels a little odd to be considering capital expenses within a recreation grant service. And so I guess I'll just put it out there that I'm looking to have an amendment to number 2 in the staff report as a further that staff be directed to review options to deliver an approach to formalize a municipal facility support agreement under the service and to report back to the commission for review. So really just to direct staff to start that conversation of exploring a formalized agreement and to come back to us.
Thanks for sharing that. When we get to that resolution, you can put it on the table and we can discuss it separately if it makes sense to do it that way. There are some more lights on, so back to Director Kettler.
Yeah, just following up on that discussion, just wondering if a separate agreement is going to disrupt this service, as it sounds like Service 600 was founded with the memorial pool in mind. And so I guess if it's removed, or if we kick the other things out, then we might need another service. Am I following that train of thought correctly?
Madam Chair, we'll come, if the resolution is adopted, we'll come back to you with options, whether there's another service through the recreation service that it could be funded, whether it's through this and what the implications would be. It's certainly a reasonable ask. It hasn't been considered previously, but we'll put our minds to it and come back to you with options should you adopt this resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, if that is the case, it seems like a lot of work for something that's not really a problem now. It's maybe doesn't sit that well with nonprofits beside municipalities on paper, but I mean, really it's functioning, it's doing its job. So to change it all just because we don't like the way it looks on paper, I wouldn't want to put staff through all that work. However, a formalized agreement does sound like a good idea. If that doesn't mean changing the service and creating another service, then I'm happy with that.
Thanks for that. And Director Grant.
Yeah, so I understand I understand what's being proposed with that amendment, but should it not be the city of Courtenay coming and asking this board? I mean, I don't know what the rest of the city of Courtenay think. I don't know what the rest of the councilors think. I don't know. You know, this is like one person bringing something. Should this not be a request from the city of Courtenay to the regional district to look at this, and then we can formalize it that way? Because we could be like, just in listening to what Director Kettler says, we could end up chasing our tail around for a long time and find out you guys aren't interested in doing that. So I think it's just kind of backwards in the way we're trying to go about it. I don't think there's anything super wrong with it. I think we should just go a different way.
Yeah, point taken, but I mean, Director Jolicoeur is a representative of the city, and I think he's well within his purview to propose an addition to a recommendation through his role here. So I don't think it needs to come from staff. I imagine that there has been some discussion of that, and I mean, it is a pretty clear rationale. So I certainly wouldn't suggest that it come through a different way. But we can debate that when we get to that resolution. I did have a couple questions about the grants as well. Sorry, I'm just shifting back away from that. One question I had was that we do put a little bit of funding away into a reserve in this grant fund. And I was just looking for a little bit more information on how that is usually used or how it's been used in the past. I just wanted to understand how that works in this particular function.
Through the chair to the director. So yeah, we do have what's called a future expenditure reserve for the service. And most of our future expenditures or reserves are there to deal with those one-off, unplanned or emergency type of expenditures. So in any given service, if we have a insurance issue that arises and we need an insurance premium, or if we have a legal issue that comes up, now that would be rare in this type of service. So really, in this case, it would be used to help mitigate, you know, any tax requisition spikes from year to year if we felt that was necessary. You know, it's not a huge reserve as Doug alluded to in here, but we're just trying to build it up slowly given the increased asks that, you know, are coming into the service, just so that if we were ever to need to pull some dollars out, again, to help buffer some of those requisitions, we're able to do that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that. And then the other question I had was just around the special events games contribution, because we are reducing it in order to meet the request of the cricket club. And just looking for a bit of context, because it says proposed was 30,000. Is that what we've typically used like pre-COVID? Is that where that number comes from? Or are we expecting some asks that we won't be able to deliver on? Or
yeah, so through the chair, right now there is nothing specified or specifically allocated for that amount. That amount has increased modestly kind of over the years, just given, you know, the increase in the asks and the expectations. But at this point, yeah, we kind of reserve that one piece so that if additional asks do come forward through the year, we have some capacity to potentially address those if they can kind of fit within that threshold.
okay, so that we really shouldn't be too hindered having 12,000 set aside, and I imagine some of that probably gets carried over into.
Yeah, correct. If it remains unspent in any given year, then it would come over by way of the prior year surplus into the next year.
Okay, great. And then the other thing I wanted to ask, just circling back to the Mountain Center request. I do remember raising the issue of whether or not they were providing recreation programs last year, as it was my understanding that they were using the Mountain Center for staff housing at the time. And I believe that we were going to follow up with them and get an understanding of how the center was being used last year. I'm wondering if we had communication that came back. I did see on their website that they did thank the CVRD for the grant, and they mentioned buying things like beds, but I didn't, I couldn't really link it to any public programming. It looked like it was more to maintain the asset.
We did have communication with them with their intent to use the grants for that type of funding, and at the time they were looking for a programmer. They lost the person that used to do it and the person before that. So some of those things changed and as last, but then again, we tried to reach out to them again this year and we just haven't been able to touch base to understand how those funds were completely used and whether they are actually going to be able to do that again this year. So there is a bit of an information gap here, as we've alluded to in this report, and we'll follow up.
Okay, thanks for that. And seeing no other lights on, we're ready to move on from receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that's carried. On to recommendation 1, that the financial plan for recreation grant service include the 18,000 conditional grant to local agencies in 2023 for cricket capital upgrades to a community field, subject to the appropriate site selection.
Second.
Any discussion or questions on the recommendation? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. On to recommendation 2, which is that the 2023 to 2027 recommended financial plan for the recreation grant service function 600 include a further 75,000 in conditional grants to local agencies in 2023 to support leak repair engineering design work for the Courtenay and District Memorial Pool, as requested by the City of Courtenay, to be funded by a corresponding increase to the 2023 tax requisition. And Director Shalika.
This would be the time to,
Yes.
yes.
I didn't
So
finish
just to
reading
speak,
Matt, sorry, can I just provide some advice? I think if you're suggesting a different form of funding this in the future, that is a different idea from this grant. So I would suggest that be a separate resolution so it doesn't get caught up. Do you understand they're two separate and distinct ideas that I think consider their grant and then put forward your resolution on how to consider this
Something for the
funding
future.
in an agreement or whatever as a separate resolution. Okay. Yep.
And this question for the CAO, but should we, on recommendation 2, sever the 2 paragraphs as well? Or leave that together, because part of it is working with the city staff, and that's probably ties into it.
The original ask was for 75,000 plus a commitment for next year. So we've dealt with that with one resolution that addresses continuing to provide more information to you as they complete the study before you consider that second request. So I think the resolution includes and further that staff work with the city. I think that's reasonable.
Okay. All right. Is there any other questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. On to recommendation 3. Oh, should we? I thought, oh, do it first.
Yes.
Okay. Let's back up 1 second here. We'll let Director Jolicoeur put his recommendation on the floor. Yeah, it's my mistake. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. And just to respond to some of the questions from my colleagues here, this my approach and my suggestion here came from consultation with other Courtenay directors at the commission as well as with staff. So City of Courtenay staff are aware of this and they're supportive of having a dialogue around potential other ways of looking at our relationship with the commission and the pool. So the motion, I think I sent it to staff here, is that staff be directed to review options to deliver an approach to formalize a municipal facility support agreement under the service and to report back to the commission for review.
Sorry.
Thank you. Just waiting to get it up on the screen. Great. Is there any further questions or comments? Did you want to speak further to that? You're good. Go ahead, Director Hillian.
And just to confirm that this is with respect to the Courtenay and District Memorial Pool. Yeah, that's why,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why I'm just adding that.
Yeah, that was actually what I wanted to ask, whether this was just in reference to the pool or if it was in reference to other municipal services that are covered by this this grant function. And I think what you're saying is that it's just about the pool.
Correct.
But presumably, the information that staff would bring forward might be relevant with a broader scope. So we might see that. Thanks.
Thank you. And alternate director Monroe.
Just a clarifying question, really, and that it seemed to me that one of the impetus behind this was to divide the service, was to separate the pool out from the grants to nonprofits. And that's not addressed in this resolution as worded. Is there a necessary change that would support that?
In that it asks for options, we'll definitely look at options, whether it continues through this grant service or whether it's funded by another service or otherwise. We'll definitely bring back the options to formalize something over the long term as opposed to a year-to-year basis. We understand that to be your intent.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other lights, we'll vote on the motion. Is all those in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. And on to recommendation 3 on the agenda, that the proposed 2023 to 2027 operating grants for the recreation service function 600 be approved. And seeing no lights on, we'll vote on that motion. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And can I get a motion for termination? Anyone opposed? Meeting's terminated.